This is a 6 News 2020 election special with your host, Sherry Jones.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Election 2020 could end up being one of the most important in our lifetimes. And it's up to us, the people of Michigan, who will help pick the next president and decide who controls the Senate, as well as shaping the future of the Michigan legislature and the state Supreme Court. In the next hour, you're going to hear from the politicians, the pollsters, and your fellow Michiganders as we cover everything from the counties to the commander-in-chief. And we begin tonight by talking about why the Great Lakes state is so important. Most political maps, like the one that you see here on 270 to win, puts Michigan in the leans Democrat column.
President Trump is recovering from the coronavirus.
China and Iran. China and Iran.
China and Iran.
So I said to my people, slow the testing down.
We'll get through this together.
But if you've seen all those commercials, it's proof that neither side is ready to give up on Michigan, because we've been here before. Most polls predicted Hillary Clinton would win the state in 2016, and more than 4.5 million Michiganders voted for the two main candidates. But in the end, President Trump beat Clinton by just 10,000 votes. And if you're looking for more proof on just how important Michigan is in this election, here's a rundown of the people who came to campaign here just this week. Doug Emhoff, the husband of Kamala Harris, made 3 stops in Michigan on Monday, including one right here in Lansing. He stopped at a local union hall where he was joined by Senator Debbie Stabenow, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and Attorney General Dana Nessel. If the Democrats win the presidential election, Emhoff will be the nation's first second gentleman. It was President Trump's second son who stopped here on Tuesday. Eric Trump was just down I-96 rallying supporters at a convention center in Novi. Of course, one of the candidates himself was here just yesterday. Vice President Mike Pence went back to Grand Rapids, which was the last stop on the 2016 campaign. While the city of Grand Rapids tends to vote blue, much of West Michigan is reliably red, and Republicans are counting on the area to deliver much-needed votes. And earlier today, the president's daughter-in-law made 2 stops, including one in Jackson County. Lara Trump, Eric Trump's wife, started her trip at the Apple Mountain Resort in Freeland, which is just outside of Saginaw, then traveled to a farm in Hanover, which is in southern Jackson County. She wrapped up her trip just a few hours ago. And of course, there are plenty of ambassadors who can make trips on a candidate's behalf, but there's only one Donald Trump and one Joe Biden. It's their visits that show just how important a state really is. And judging by their travel plans, both have their sights set on winning here. The vice president made a couple of stops in Michigan, including a union hall in Warren back on September 9th. Then 2 weeks ago, he traveled to the west side of the state. And just a few hours ago, the Biden campaign announced that Joe Biden will be back in Michigan tomorrow. He'll make 2 stops, talking about health care in Southfield and about voting during a visit to Detroit. President Trump's last visit to Michigan was a little more than a month ago. He stopped in Saginaw County for a campaign rally on September 10th. And he just announced that he'll be making another stop in the Great Lakes state. He'll touch down at a Muskegon airport on Saturday to fire up his supporters. Of course, tune in to 6 News Saturday night for more on the president's visit. But don't just take our word for how important this state is. We've also got the experts. Siobhan Klepfer sat down with ABC News political analyst Rick Klein to get his take on the battle for Michigan.
Rick, good to have you again. Let's jump right in. Based on your political experience, how would you describe the 2020 presidential race in one word, and then expand on that?
Insane. I mean, every time we thought that this race couldn't get any weirder, it has. And what's interesting, though, is that for as unstable as events have felt, there is a stability to the polling in the race. And whether that extends or not to the last 18 days, I don't have a prediction on that. I know that we have been met by so many unexpected events. This has been in no way, as stable as it's in no way been a predictable race or a calm race. It has been kind of all over the place.
How important is Michigan in this race?
Michigan has always been up there, along with Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, as the critical states. I mean, that's how Donald Trump won the presidency, by winning the upper Midwest battlegrounds that are part of the so-called blue wall. frankly, that's a lot of Joe Biden's appeal, is to win back states like Michigan, in addition to Pennsylvania, where I am right now, and Wisconsin. That's the key to the election. Now, it's not the only route that Biden has, but it's certainly the most enticing, and at this stage, maybe the most realistic for starters, because as much as we're talking about states like Florida and Texas and North Carolina and Arizona, they matter almost not at all if Joe Biden just wins back Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania.
Let's talk about mail-in voting. Some states have been doing this by the masses for years and have it down to a science. Here in Michigan, not so much. What's the strategy behind attacking and then on the other side, encouraging mail-in voting?
Well, it seems like the Republicans are trying to undermine confidence in the system. They're worried that Democrats are going to be more motivated to vote via mail-in, and that's why you see the president continually saying that it just isn't a safe and secure way to count votes. On the other side, Democrats recognize that it's a way to get more people to participate. It's certainly easier than showing up at a polling place. You get lower propensity voters, maybe some older and sicker voters as well, people that might be concerned about going out in public during COVID-19. So you've seen a lot of states expand the ways that people can vote, including by mail, and a lot of folks partaking of that option.
How important are these last couple of weeks, or have most people made up their minds by now?
Yeah, I don't think this is about undecided voters so much. I mean, that's a tiny slice of the electorate, and it isn't enough to really determine the election, but persuasion matters. And people that might not be committed to a candidate or not committed to voting at all or thinking about a third-party candidate, they're the people that are in play. They're the people that both candidates need to close the deal with. A lot of it is playing up to your base, but it really is just convincing people of the stakes of the election and on the importance of voting for either candidate or any candidate at all.
Do you see any major developments from now until Election Day?
I think you have to expect the unexpected. We've seen so many surprises, even before October, that October surprises seem inevitable. There will be other things that drop. There'll be other things that happen. World events always shape the closing parts of campaigns. Obviously, the fact that so many votes are already banked changes things a bit. It's hard to make up a gap when you have a dynamic process that is people voting literally by the minute, by the hour. But yes, I think we have to be prepared to expect something different to happen or new to happen in the closing hours.
Rick Klein, thank you so much. We appreciate your expertise on this.
And thank you, Siobhan. Coming up next, we're going to talk about what really matters to Michigan voters and what you think about the president catching COVID. Those stories and much more when our election special continues. There are so many issues out there that are so important to so many people. Healthcare, the economy, jobs, guns, abortion. So we ask, what are the issues that matter most to Michiganders, and how are they making up their minds? As you might imagine, the COVID crisis topped the list. Almost a quarter of those surveyed say reopening the economy, the schools, and restoring the jobs lost to the virus is their top concern. Almost as many say protecting public health by reducing the number of COVID cases and deaths is their highest priority. 12% of respondents said controlling violence and crime is their top issue. Well, what about the first presidential debate? Our poll shows that 3/4 of those surveyed watched it. It was a night to remember, and a night most of us would like to forget.
Bill, you're the winner.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
I want to make sure.
Mr. President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. He has,
You'd be surprised.
You picked
You'd be surprised.
the
Go ahead,
wrong
Joe.
guy,
Go,
the wrong
Joe,
night at
go.
the wrong time.
Listen, you agreed with Bernie Sanders on a plan.
Folks,
absolutely
folks,
agreed
do you have
to,
any
and under that
idea
plan,
what
you have
this clown's
socialized the
doing?
coalition.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the question
You wanna put a lot
is
of
the
new
question
Supreme Court
is
justice,
the
radical
question.
left.
Will you
Who
shut
is your,
up, man?
listen,
So, who won that slugfest? Our exclusive 6 News poll shows that of the people who picked a winner, chose Vice President Biden by a margin of 2-1. But check it out, that margin was only 41 to 20% because a third of those who responded chose neither. So with numbers like these, did the debate sway any voters? Well, here's Epic MRA pollster Bernie Porn.
Probably not that much of a difference. I think that they believe that Joe Biden won the debate by a plurality, but I think the position of people has been so baked in. Before the debate, we had roughly the same numbers in the presidential race as what we have now.
So what do Michiganders think about the October surprise, President Trump coming down with COVID-19? Here's what we found. About a quarter of Michiganders said they had some sympathy for the president after he caught the coronavirus, while around 60% say they're not sympathetic because he brought it on himself. And if there's any COVID bump, it goes to the Democrats. Almost 20% of those polled say the whole thing made it more likely that they would vote for Vice President Biden. That's double the number who said it makes them more likely to vote for President Trump. But almost 2/3 of those asked say it won't make any difference. And then there's the matter of the president's taxes. That's after the New York Times reported that he did not pay any tax for 10 of the last 15 years, only about $750 in 2016 and 2017. Well, 40% of those polled say it's fine with them because President Trump is a smart businessman who is just taking advantage of our tax laws. Half of those polled say Trump cheated on his taxes and should be held accountable. The remaining 10% said neither or both, were undecided, or refused to say. This may be one issue where our pollsters said this could make a difference.
For some people, I think it was a deciding factor, and clearly people do not think that he is a smart, savvy businessman.
So where does all this leave us? We'll tell you what the polls say when Trump and Biden go head-to-head, and that's next in our 6 News Election Special. Thanks for watching and stay tuned. Well, we've talked about how important Michigan is in the presidential race and the issues that matter to Michigan voters. Now, with 19 days until Election Day, here's a look at where things stand. A new poll commissioned by 6 News shows Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden leading President Donald Trump in the race for Michigan's 16 electoral votes. The survey shows the former vice president with the support of just under half of Michigan voters, while the Republican incumbent at just under 40%. That gives Biden a 9-point lead. 4% of those polled say they support a third party. Another 9% were undecided or refused to say. And the results of that poll could explain that difference because it shows most Michiganders are not very happy with the president's performance. The survey of 600 Michiganders shows that 41% say they view him favorably, while more than half, 55%, view him unfavorably. Those numbers practically mirror the president's job rating. Again, 41% say he was doing pretty good or excellent job, while 57% say he's doing just fair or poor. But the numbers are even worse when it comes to the economy. Right now, slightly more than a third of voters say the American economy is in good shape, and almost 2/3 gave it a negative rating. When asked how they feel about where the country is going, just 30% say we're headed in the right direction, while almost twice as many say the nation is headed down the wrong track. The poll of 600 people was conducted between October 8th and 12th and has a margin of error of plus or minus 4%. Well, polls are important. They give us an overall picture about what's important to Michiganders and an indication as to how you're going to vote. But we also thought it was important to get on the ground and talk about how those numbers are playing out in real life. CBS News reporter Janet Shamlian is here for you with that story.
In the pumpkin patch, they're still choosing. But voters like Adrienne Ross have already decided who they're voting for.
What's the biggest factor for you?
It is a lot around guns and then abortion.
Kirsten and Justin McCoy are just as set on their choice.
Why are you voting for Biden?
I think one of the things that feels the most heartbreaking for me right now is the state of race relations and the racism in America.
It's really important to me that everybody has access to health care. It's really important to me that we're taking care of the planet.
Yeah.
Both campaigns are pushing hard to rally their base. The president won Michigan by fewer than 11,000 votes in 2016, the smallest margin of victory in any state.
He made promises and delivers.
Many of his supporters remain enthusiastic.
And then you're going to put a dab of hot glue.
Jackie Hines teaches a flower arranging class in the small community of Cedar Springs. Her decision to vote for President Trump is based on a single issue.
Pro-life. That's pretty much it. Honestly, I'm not a fan of either candidates, but that is very important to me.
The recent news about an alleged plot by an extremist group to kidnap Michigan's governor has shocked voters like Regina Manning, who blames the president's rhetoric for emboldening such groups.
The way he's carrying on, I think he's making it easier for people to show their true color.
The African-American community in Grand Rapids has been holding events to register voters. William Raylock and Iriana Hogan say the president has let them down.
he's driving voters to the polls to vote him out.
He doesn't stand up for the African American community. We want to feel supported in the things that we do and some of the injustice that happens.
Well, I think between the two candidates.
Amid a tight race, it may be Michiganders like Sally and Ron Plune who helped decide it. They've already voted.
Is this the first time you voted Democrat?
Yes.
Why?
I need somebody that has a little compassion and thinks about the other person.
We see all that's developed in the Trump era here with these past 4 years. And I'm asking myself, what is he doing to help us out? He's denying that COVID even really exists. He says it's no more than a flu. He doesn't show vision, and he lies like a rug.
With a population of almost 10 million, a tale of two electorates in Michigan, most in this season of fall foliage and apple picking are dug in and decided. What's rare? Voters still thinking it over.
I don't like the things that Donald Trump has to say about women, about minorities, about different ethnic groups. I think it's very inappropriate. But I think he is appropriate to lead an economy and grow. He's a businessman, so I agree with that.
Former Vice President Biden and his wife Jill have been here in recent weeks, an important region in a critical state. Both sides believe they can win. Janet Shamlian, CBS News, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Thank you, Janet. And coming up next, we go one-on-one with Vice President Mike Pence, one day after his visit to Michigan. The 6 News election special. We'll be right back.
It's on, and the road to victory runs right through Michigan.
That was Vice President Mike Pence in Grand Rapids yesterday, stressing, as we told you off the top of this show, just how important this state is when it comes to picking the next president. A reporter from our sister station in Grand Rapids had the chance to talk to the vice president one-on-one during his visit to the state yesterday. They talked about two of the bigger issues facing the nation right now, concerns about election security and President Trump's Supreme Court nomination. Here's their conversation.
President Trump and I are absolutely committed to making it easy to vote, hard to cheat. Absentee balloting is fine. Early voting is a time-honored tradition. People can early vote here in Michigan, voting on Election Day. But unsolicited universal mail-in balloting will continue to oppose to protect that principle of the integrity of our vote.
You made it very clear that you want the president's nominee put on the Supreme Court. Are you confident that that will happen, and will it happen in 19 days or will it happen after the election?
Well, President Trump and I couldn't be more proud of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. And the American people have seen this week before the Senate Judiciary Committee not only her brilliance, her intellect, her background, but also the temperament that she has shown under some difficult questioning and political posturing on the committee. And we have every confidence that in the days ahead, Judge Amy Coney Barrett will be Justice Amy Coney Barrett. We're going to fill that seat. We're going to make every effort to work with the leadership in the United States Senate to get a vote, to have her seated, because the Supreme Court does meet after the election on a broad range of important issues, and the American people deserve to have 9 justices on the Supreme Court. And I think as Americans look in this week, they know why President Trump chose a great Hoosier jurist, a woman of great character, great personal story, and great intellect in Judge Amy Coney Barrett to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States.
When we come back, we're going to take a closer look at some of the other people that you'll be sending to Washington. We turn our attention to Capitol Hill when 6 News returns. We spent a lot of time talking about the White House, but that's not the only branch of government that's at stake in this election. Control of the U.S. Senate is also up for grabs, and Republicans hope to make the Great Lakes state one of their pickups, because when we surveyed voters about the incumbent Democrat Gary Peters, we got a split decision. When asked what they think of Michigan's junior senator, 42% say they have a favorable opinion of him, while 30% say they view him unfavorably. And when asked about how he's doing on the job, his numbers flip. 37% say he's doing excellent or pretty good, while 43% say just fair or poor. So how do the numbers play out when Peters goes head-to-head with Republican challenger John James? Take a look. The survey shows Peters with a 6-point lead. He He's got the support of 45% of voters. Challenger John James is coming in with just under 40%. Another 11% are still undecided or refuse to say, and 5% say they're thinking third party. So if they don't think he's doing a particularly good job, how is Peters in the lead? Well, pollster Bernie Porn explains.
It's largely party, and also I think a more negative view of John James with the negative advertising that has been airing recently. I think that has had a profound impact on the U.S. Senate race.
And this election isn't just about who controls the U.S. Senate. The entire House of Representatives is also up for grabs. And we've got several races right here in mid-Michigan, including the battle for the Michigan 7th. It includes most of all of 7 different counties in Michigan, including all of Eaton, Jackson, and Hillsdale. Congressman Tim Walberg represented the 7th District in 2007 and 2008, lost his bid for re-election, then won the seat back in 2010 and has held on to it ever since. Now he's going up against former state representative and former Saline Mayor Gretchen Driscoll for the 3rd time in a row. Then there's the 8th Congressional District, which includes Lansing and all of Ingham County, all of Livingston County, and the northern half of Oakland County. Republicans dominated the district, holding on to it from 2000 until 2018, when Democrat Elissa Slotkin unseated the incumbent Mike Bishop. It was a hard-fought and very close race. Slotkin edged Bishop out by around 13,000 votes, or less than 4%. Now Slotkin is in a re-election battle of her own. The former CIA analyst and current Congresswoman is going up against Paul Young, a former TV anchor, deputy district attorney, and federal government employee. He worked at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. 6 News welcomed the two to our studios for the very first debate. Here they are talking about voting along party lines and weighing in on the congressional relief plans as part of the national response to COVID-19.
Bipartisanship really runs in my blood because in national security, it's really a focus on the mission and not which party you're from. When I served 3 tours in Iraq, no one ever asked me, are you a Democrat or Republican before you get into a Humvee? And I know that Mr. Young has spent a lot of time, a lot of money playing these ads that talking about this percentage, 96%. So let me just address it right up front. First and foremost, that is a misleading and cherry-picked piece of information. It represents just about over 70 votes that I've taken, when in fact I've taken over 800 votes, and 640 of those votes have had at least another Republican joining with me.
I think I can almost certainly say I wouldn't vote with the president 100% of the time. I can think of one specific example. I know that President Trump had suggested cuts in the Great Lakes restoration. I would oppose that. There will be undoubtedly many different things that the president would pursue that I would focus on what the interests of the voters of the 8th District is. But it's interesting in listening to Congresswoman Slotkin talk about cherry-picking votes when, of course, that's of the 800 votes, she can only pick out 56 where she says she voted with Republicans. And in particular, it's interesting to me that her definition of a bipartisan bill is one where at least one Republican voted with her. So there might be an excellent example of whether that's really bipartisan or not, is the $3 trillion HEROES Act that the House passed back in May. That was opposed by 14 Democrats and only had one Republican who supported it. So I suppose by Congresswoman Slotkin's definition, that is a bipartisan bill. But of the 14 Democrats who voted against it, most of them said this was terrible Washington politics. I mean, the CARES Act and the previous 2 acts before that, I was supportive of those acts. And that's why I was saying earlier that the HEROES Act, which was just so many unrelated aspects, $1,200 stimulus checks to illegal immigrants, letting violent criminals go free, putting a ban on voter ID, so many things that were just so unrelated to COVID relief were part of what made that such a terrible deal. And as Congresswoman Slotkin's colleagues who are Democrats indicated, that passage of that bill would just delay getting more coronavirus relief. And that of course, is what we've seen.
You know, after negotiations broke down on this additional COVID bill back in early to mid-August, a group of us, the Problem Solvers Caucus, this group that's 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans, we were deeply unsatisfied that leadership in the House, in the Senate, and in the White House were refusing to get back to the negotiating room. We started meeting quietly without staff over Zoom every couple of days to hash out what we thought was the best way forward on a plan. So the plan combines assistance for state and locals. It has money for unemployment. It includes additional stimulus checks, which is something that the president has said that he has also wanted. It includes money for our schools so that they can teach no matter where the kids are, in person or virtual. And it's a bridging bill that takes us through about February so that we can reassess. We can look then at where we are with the coronavirus. Are we in sight of a vaccine? Are we coming out of this recession? Or do we need to approve more?
Well, we've been spending a lot of time talking about who voters will send to the nation's capital, but coming up after the break, we'll tell you about the battle that's brewing for two branches of government right here in Michigan's capital. That's next when the 6 News Election Special continues. Welcome back. There is a lot at stake in the 2020 election, and we're not just talking about which party wins the White House or the Senate. There's also plenty at stake right here in Michigan, as control of 2 out of 3 branches of the state government are up for grabs. Republicans have had a stranglehold on the legislature for a long time, the state Senate for at least the last 30 years, and the House of Representatives for the last 10. That's been great for Republican governors, and as you might imagine, not so great for Democrats. One of the most closely watched races for the legislature is happening right here in mid-Michigan. While there are many safe seats, Eaton County's 71st House District could be a bellwether. Republican Deb Shaughnessy held the seat back in 2010, but since then it has changed hands several times. Democrat Teresa Abbott ousted the incumbent back in 2012, but she lost her seat just 2 years later to Republican Tom Barrett, who won by less than 150 votes. Barrett also beat her in a rematch 2 years later, but when he left to run for the Michigan Senate in 2018, Angela Whitwer put the seat back in the blue column, winning by less than 700 votes. Now Whitwer is defending her seat against Gina Johnson, and the winner of that race could help decide which party controls the Michigan House. Voters will also decide the direction of the Michigan Supreme Court. While it's not technically a partisan race, the 7 members of the court are typically endorsed by one party or the other when they run for election. Right now, there's a 4-3 split on the court in favor of Republicans. And 2 of the seats that are up for grabs this year, one comes from each party, and the Republican is retiring. So if Democrats sweep both seats, it would give them the majority. Can it happen? And if so, what would it mean? We asked Jorma Duran to get some analysis from 6 News Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic.
We are less than 3 weeks away from the November general election, and of course, we're interested in the race for the presidency, but we want to bring in Tim Skubic because Tim, here in the state of Michigan, we got a lot of important races, especially in the House. Everyone's really going up, and every seat is up for grabs. Can, in any way, shape, or form, have the control be switched over from the GOP to the Democrat side?
This is an easy one, Jorma. The answer is yes. The question is, will it happen? But the Democrats think they've got a perfect storm coming together. They don't think that Donald Trump is going to do well at the top of the ticket in Michigan, and they think that will have an impact on races across the state of Michigan. As with everything in politics, it comes down to the numbers, and here are the numbers. Right now, the Republicans have a comfortable control of the Michigan House. However, if the Democrats can move from 52 seats that they currently have and add just 4 more seats, 4 more, they can get to 56, and that's the magic number. If they get to 56 House seats, they will take control from the Democrats for the first time in a long, long time. Here's another part of the story that people really haven't focused on, and it's an interesting one. Let's assume that they don't get to 4, but they get to 3. Then we have an absolute tie, 55 Ds, 55 R's, and what does that mean? It means shared power. The last time this happened, Jorma, was in 1994 when both parties split it right down the middle in the House. And what did they do? 1 month, the Democrats ran the House. The next month, the Republicans ran the House, and they went back and forth month after month. And believe it or not, it worked. It may have been because the personalities that were running the House, the co-speakers, if you will. So that's a possibility as well. This House is in play.
Maybe something that's in play is the state Supreme Court. We just obviously had to deal with a decision that's kind of changed the landscape with COVID-19 restrictions. we potentially may go from 4 to 3 Democrat more controlled. Is that correct?
That is absolutely right. Right now, the Republicans are in control. Although they say this is a bipartisan court, we still look at it in terms of which party do they come from. Yeah. Remember, these candidates are nominated at a party convention, and then they run on the nonpartisan ballot. The interesting thing about the Supreme Court is that a lot of people don't know who these people are. But when you get to the ballot, if you haven't done it yet, you're going to see one of the candidates that will have under her name Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. That is worth about 5 billion votes. And then everybody else that is on the ballot, you go by names. And there's one name on there that is very popular. It is Kelly. Another name that we don't know all of the people that are on there, but it turns into a name game. So they will pick 2 seats. And if the Democrats pick up 2 seats, they'll control the court. If they don't, they won't.
All right. Thank you, Jorma and Tim. Still ahead, we're going to take you to the banks of the Red Cedar, introduce you to a couple of would-be trustees, because it's up to you who runs MSU. That's next when our 6 News Election Special continues. We've talked about presidents and politicians a lot tonight, but Michiganders will also choose the people who help run the University of Michigan, Wayne State, and Michigan State University. It's not easy to run a major university in the best of times. Now imagine adding a pandemic to the mix, not to mention the recent sordid history at MSU. Well, the Board of Trustees came under fire for their handling of the Larry Nassar situation, as well as their hiring and ultimate firing of former Governor John Engler as the interim president of MSU. Now they're working with a new president, Dr. Samuel Stanley. He's been on the job for just over a year. Now, while it can be less partisan than serving in the state legislature, nominees for the trustee job are still selected by the major political parties. There are 2 seats up for election. Incumbent Brian Mosallam is one of the Democratic nominees, and he's joined on the ticket by Rima Vassar. Republicans have nominated Tanya Shoemaker and Pat O'Keefe. 6 News sat down with Mosallam and Shoemaker to talk about what makes them the best candidate and about restoring trust at MSU. Here's some of what they had to say.
You know, I was the first to call for Engler's resignation, issued a plan of reform, held a town hall, first to apologize and meet with survivors. I have been tested. I have been tested in times of crisis. While everybody else ran and hid, I was tested, and I faced the public. I went and met with survivors. I never ducked from the media. Everything I have ever said, I have meant publicly.
I can tell you the skills that I bring, and that is the fact that, you know, I have had, you know, unfortunately Michigan State had the unfortunate situation with that monster, Larry Nassar, and, you know, I was sticking up for the survivors long before anyone else was. I met with Rachel Den-Hollander in December of that year and worked with Senator Margaret O'Brien to bring justice for those victims at Michigan State. So I didn't wait till it became a popular thing to do. I was there on the front lines, and certainly, you know, I would have never have given Luanna Simon a $25,000 raise in the midst of that. And so I think that would be differences that how I would govern on that board is I would not recommend a $25,000 salary increase in the midst of this. And, you know, I also have the experience in the higher education. I also was fortunate enough to co-chair with First Lady Sue Snyder for 7 years, the Let's End Campus Sexual Assault on college campuses. So I think I have the experience, the passion, and the drive to be an excellent board member on Michigan State's board.
And there is no question with the institutional knowledge that I have, the battles that I have been through, the trust that I have built with the survivors, the initiatives that I have put in place that have been actually adopted. There's nobody better positioned nobody better positioned right now to move this university forward from the trustee level.
First and foremost, there needs to be a restoration of trust. And, you know, that's not going to be done overnight, but certainly I think having a new, fresh perspective that aims to look towards the future and rebuild that trust that has been broken with the current board and its board members, I think will go a long way.
Well, coming up next, we're going to get super local as we talk about the various races for each county's top cop and talk to the candidates in Mid-Michigan's most intriguing race. That's right after the break when our 6 News Election Special continues. Welcome back. Now, besides the election and the COVID crisis, there's been one other major issue on America's front burner in recent months: the relationship between minorities and law enforcement. And we bring this up now because while Michiganders don't get to choose police chiefs, you do get to select your county's top cop, the local sheriff. And at least 3 counties will choose sheriffs for the very first time. The incumbents in Jackson and Hillsdale counties decided not to run for re-election. And in Ionia County, voters will confirm a man who was appointed midterm and is now running to keep his job. But one of the most intriguing sheriff's races right here in mid-Michigan doesn't feature new faces, but some old ones, because in Eaton County, the current sheriff, Democrat Tom Reich, is facing a challenge from a previous sheriff, Republican Rick Jones. Siobhan Klepfer sat down with both candidates on a Zoom call earlier today, and they talked about a number of issues, including race. Here are some of the highlights.
Mr. Jones, we'll start with you for this next question. This year, there have been protests across the country about police brutality and racism. Do you think racism is an issue in Eaton County? And if so, how will you address it if you're elected sheriff?
I believe that racism has been an issue at times in Eaton County's history. Certainly, I will address it by reaching out to every community. I will be available to go to an African-American church, to go to an Indian temple. I will go anywhere they ask me to go and address the issues. Recently, I got a call from a local African-American activist, Jeremy Claiborne. He told me he'd moved from Lansing into Delta Township, wanted my sign in his yard, said he was going to support me because he wanted to see change. And I said, one of the biggest changes I want is I want all communities to participate in the sheriff department. I want to recruit African Americans and Latinos. We just lost a Latino officer that announced he's retiring. So I want everybody, I want diversion in the sheriff department, and I will make that a priority.
Sheriff Reich, same question. Do you think racism is an issue in Eaton County? And if so, how will you address it if reelected?
I have not seen it existing here in Eaton County by my deputies. I do not tolerate racism. My deputies are trained not to do it. This kind of hits close to home for me, Siobhan. I have 2 biracial granddaughters who deserve to grow up safe from the fear that they could be racially profiled. I expect my deputies to treat everyone, no matter their race, with respect. So with that, I have not seen it. If it does happen, my deputies will be disciplined. Can also respond to Rick's comment. Rick made that comment regarding one of my Latino deputies. He didn't resign, he didn't retire. He withdrew his resignation. I still have him on board. He's still honored to be with the Eaton County Sheriff's Office. So I don't know where Rick's getting his information from, but it's wrong.
I'm happy that Deputy Lopez is staying on with the Sheriff Department. I need him. He announced he was going to retire. I'm glad he's not.
We have more of their conversation between Rick Reich and Jones. It will air this weekend on the 6 News Capitol Rundown on WLNS and WLAJ. And we'll put the whole thing online in the election special of WLNS.com. We definitely want to thank you for investing your time in this and joining us tonight. And we want to remind you of 2 things. 6 News is your local election headquarters, and we've got you covered on air, online, and on our 6 News app. And whether you do it in person, whether a drop box or by mail, make sure that you get out and vote. It is our right as Americans to do that. Don't take it for granted. Again, the election is 19 days away. So good night, and thank you for joining us, and I'll see you in just a few minutes coming up on 6 News at 11. Until then, have a good night.